Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
I didn't get a chance to ask earlier because we started so quickly. Is there anyone here joining us today for the first time or returning after a while? Okay, well that's good. We'll go ahead and start our day as always with our name. My name is Roy.
I'm Tom.
I'm both.
My name is Michael.
My name is Tom.
James. Bruein.
My name is Robert.
Jonathan.
My name is David.
My name is Lee. My name is Mark.
Jose.
I'm Clint.
My name is Jerry.
David.
Shantan. Francesco.
David.
My name is Ray.
Mikey.
Jack.
Rob.
I'm Brad.
My name is Dennis.
Kevin.
Tim.
Antoine. Peter.
John.
I'm Hal. I'm Craig.
Jay.
Tom.
Yes, you are. So our speaker today is Tom Moon. Tom has been a practitioner of Vipassana meditation for 15 years, and his spiritual home is Spirit Rock Meditation Center. He is a psychologist in San Francisco, working primarily with gay men. His chief commitment is in exploring the interface between Buddhist practice and psychotherapy. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Morning. Well, we all made the sacrifice. We all gave up an hour to shorten the Trump presidency. A few months ago, I was on Muni, and I happened to overhear a young guy behind me mansplaining Buddhism to his girlfriend, telling her that we don't pray in Buddhism because, as everyone knows, the Buddha was an atheist, and there's no one to pray to. Buddhism is the path of self-reliance, and I might have turned to him and said, are you talking about Buddhism or the Church of Ayn Rand here? But I didn't do that. I thought, well, now I have my topic, because I was already scheduled to speak today, and I thought it would be really interesting to talk about prayer and devotional practices in Buddhism, because that's rarely addressed. It's a topic that's rarely addressed. So I thought I would talk about that today, and it would just give me a chance to look into it a little bit. So I'll start with the Buddha's atheism, and to do that, I want to go back to the stories, retell a little bit about the stories of the first day of the Buddha's enlightenment. As you know, the night of his enlightenment was a wild ride, right? I mean, there were 3 watches. There were torrents of insights, of eons of his own former lives, then eons of everybody else's former lives, and then in the 3rd watch he realizes the 4 Noble Truths, and then Mara, the Lord of Delusion, attacks him, because Mara is anti-enlightenment for reasons that are never explained. He doesn't want his job is to see that you don't get enlightened. So he's doing everything he can to distract and scare and challenge Siddhartha. And as the Buddha's getting closer to the moment of his awakening, Mara screams at him, what right have you to get enlightened? I'm more spiritually adept than you are. And so the Buddha reaches out his hand and calls on the earth to bear witness to his right to be enlightened, and he touches the earth, and the earth roars. And that is the moment of his awakening. He passed through the door to the deathless in that moment. Or as the Heart Sutra says, it says, Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, svaha bodhi, which means gone to the far shore, gone beyond the far shore, and then svaha bodhi, which means the equivalent of hallelujah in English. So, yeah, that statue, whenever a statue is like that, it represents the moment of the Buddha's awakening when he's touching the earth and asking the earth to bear witness. So the demons go, Mara goes. There was 40,000 of them trying to stop him. So now he's crossed over. He's now the Buddha, the awakened one. And I think he's 35 years old. And he gets up, and the question now is, now what? Right? He's thinking to himself, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. And so the world holds nothing for me anymore. So I'll just leave the world. I'll just go sit under a tree and enjoy all this joy and perfection. Well, those thoughts are overheard in the God realms. And one of the gods drops down to earth to talk this over with the Buddha. And not just any god, Brahma, who is the creator god in Hinduism. He's one of three. There's a triad. It's Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer. So they're responsible in Hindu mythology for the creation and destruction of worlds. So Brahma appears to the Buddha, and he walks up to him and he prostrates before the Buddha. And he gets up and he says, "Dude," I'm paraphrasing a little bit. He says, there are people with just, or there are beings in this realm with just a little dust on their eyes. They will understand. And so he talks about it with the Buddha, and the Buddha is convinced that Brahma is right, and Brahma returns to the God realms. And that is why, according to all the traditions in Buddhism, the Buddha became a world teacher because a god talked him into it. This is the mythology. But you notice Brahma bowed down to him. I mean, he didn't bow down to Brahma. So it's not like he had a lot of respect for the gods. I mean, one of the reasons he had a reputation from the Brahmins for being an atheist or for being a religious heretic was that he didn't go for all. The sacrifices to the gods were not how you get to enlightenment, right? That was kind of irrelevant. They're there, but he seems in all the... I'll tell you another God story in a few minutes. I mean, he seems to have accepted the polytheism of his time, is the point I'm making. But it wasn't all that important to him, and it wasn't important to the path. Another reason that he... since he was higher than the gods in a sense, because he'd attained nirvana, but the gods, while they may have been very advanced spiritually, had not done that. So one of his honorific titles for 2,000 years, he's known as the Awakened One, the Buddha, Sukhiya, the Happy One. He's also known as the Teacher of Gods and Men, all over Asia. So, but another reason he was known as kind of a heretic is the way he would answer religious questions, right? He wouldn't. People would ask him, what happens to a Buddha after he dies? Is the universe finite or infinite? And all this kind of stuff. And he's supposed to answer those questions because it was assumed in that time, that an enlightened being is omniscient. He can answer any question about anything. And so he would just sit silently whenever he was asked those questions. And, why would he do that? So he explained this to his followers one day in a sutta called The Discourse on a Handful of Leaves. So he's sitting under a tree in the woods, and he picked up a few leaves in his hand, and he asked the bhikkhus, the monks, "How do you conceive this, bhikkhus? Which is more, the few leaves that I have picked up in my hand, or those on the trees in the wood?" And they said, "Well, the leaves that the Blessed One has picked up in his hand are few, Lord. Those in the wood are more." He said, "So too, bhikkhus, the things that I have known by direct knowledge are more. The things that I have told you are only a few." So he doesn't deny his omniscience there. I mean, he's saying, I've learned as much as all these leaves in these trees, but I'm only teaching you this. And he said, "Why have I not told these other things?" Because they bring no benefit, no advancement in the holy life, and because they do not lead to dispassion, to fading, to ceasing, to stilling, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. That is why I have not told them. And what have I told you? This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That is what I have told you. Why have I told you? Because it leads to benefit and advancement in the holy life, and because it leads to dispassion, to fading, to ceasing, to stilling, etc. So, in this, he presents himself essentially the doctor of the soul, and he's explaining his mission, which is very circumspect in a way. It's very important, but it's about suffering and the ending of suffering. So it's not about atheism. It's not about theism. It's not about polytheism. It's not about pantheism. It's not about it's about suffering and the ending of suffering. But he lived in a world where he seems to have accepted all the talking earths and demons and so on. These are all part of the world that he lived in. And if you read the sutras, he seems to have accepted all this stuff, but it wasn't about his mission. But in terms of suffering and the ending of suffering and the path leading to the ending of suffering, the question that comes up for me is, well, what about devotional practices and prayer and those kind of practices? Did the Buddha see those as part of the path that leads to the ending of suffering? And the answer really is an unequivocal yes, he did. Devotion was central to the central attitude and the central practice. I'll talk about one of the practices. German-born monk Nyanaponika Thera talked about the importance of reverence and devotion in Buddhism, the rationale for it in Buddhism. He said, one who is incapable of a reverential attitude will be incapable of spiritual progress beyond the narrow limits of his present mental condition. One who is so blind as not to see or recognize anything higher and better than this little mud pool of his petty self and environment will suffer. It is by recognizing and honoring someone or something higher that one honors and enhances one's own inner potentialities. One of the practices that the Buddha taught, Buddha Nusati, it means recollection of the Buddha. And he taught that while he was still alive. I think it was more while he was, shortly before he died, he began teaching this because he knew he was going to be gone. And Buddha Nusati, basically, the idea is to keep the master always in your presence. The ideal of the Buddha always in your presence. And it can be done a lot of different ways, and is all over the Asian world. It's still done today. Offerings of flowers, incense, prostrations. I remember one of the most beautiful things I saw when I was in Bodh Gaya was these young Tibetan monks doing their 108 prostrations every morning in the sun in the square, the temple where the Bodhi tree or a descendant of it is still. And they all had their robes down around their waists, and they were so joyful, just prostrating before the Buddha. It was a sight to behold for a number of reasons. Some of them were quite cute, is basically what I'm saying. But their devotion was palpable, and they would work that up as they did their practice. And seeing them in the street afterwards, walking around, they were all just, oh, hi, and I've never seen such happy people in my life. And so it was cultivating devotion. And in Mahayana Buddhism, Buddha-Nusati practices are extended to multiple Buddhas, to bodhisattvas such as Maitreya, Avalokiteshvara, Tara, Amitabha. And then there's practices for evoking compassion with Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion, whose name means she who hears the weeping world. So here's what the Buddha himself said about Buddha-Nusati practice. When a noble disciple contemplates upon the enlightened one, at that time his mind is not enwrapped in lust, nor in hatred, nor in delusion. At such a time is rightly directed toward the perfect one, the Tathagata. And with a rightly directed mind, the noble disciple gains enthusiasm for the goal, enthusiasm for the Dharma, gains the delight derived from the Dharma. In him thus delighted, joy arises. And to one who is joyful, body and mind become calm. Calmed in body and mind, he feels at ease. And if at ease, the mind finds concentration. Such a one is called a noble disciple, who among humanity gone wrong has attained to what is right, who among humanity beset by troubles dwells free of troubles. So that's there's a lot of benefits he felt to devotional practice. And that it was kind of the basis, it was kind of the basic attitude you have for all the other practices. It's an attitude of reverence and trust in the Buddha. Now, so far, nothing has been said that would make a rationalist blush about, the way we usually talk about devotional practices is this way, that they change you. So if you are taking refuge in the Buddha, you're taking refuge in your own Buddhahood. If you do a practice for Kuan Yin, you're awakening your own compassion. Whereas in other religions, of course, if you pray, the assumption is that there's something outside of you. There's a God who will respond. That in something is altered, or there's a communion with God. It's a little different. And so the question I ask is, well, what about that? Did the Buddha believe that if you did devotional practices, that did he believe in some sense that those prayers were answered? So what do you think? Or would he have said that was a delusion? What, delusion or real? Or Delusion.
Because aren't you clinging to something if you want an answer? And he was always about letting go and,
Well, I have another story about this. This is a wild one. This is another God story. It's a teaching story in the Theravada Suttas. So that one of his disciples was, what's his name? Adina Pubaka. I don't know. I hope that's close. Was a lay disciple of the Buddha, and he had a son, Madakundali, 16-year-old boy, who got sick, and he was jaundiced and was basically dying of some kind of liver disease. So his father had him on the porch on the veranda of his house, sitting on lying on a bed, and the Buddha and the multitude, I guess, come walking by, and Madhukundali sees him coming, and he wants to go to him and get a blessing, but he can't. He can't get off the bed, and and he realizes, I'm dying. So what he does is recollection of the Buddha. He fills his heart with joy, devotion, and love for the Buddha, and becomes radiant with joy, and in that moment he dies, and is immediately reborn in the God realms and gets a gold house that's 30 leagues long. So the Buddha keeps on walking by because he's omniscient, right? And the kid's fine, as far as he's concerned. But the father is bereft. And so Madhukundali, call him M, I can't do this. M, up there in the God realms, looks back at his former life, and he sees his father wailing in the charnel grounds. So he goes down and appears to him and says, I'm fine, Dad, I got a house and I'm a god, things are fine. He says, don't grieve for me. And the father is overjoyed to see him, and then the boy disappears. But the father is full of doubt. He's thinking, is that little bit of devotion capable of producing such karmic consequences? I mean, such effects, And so he has that doubt whether can that really be. So he takes the question to the Buddha. And so the Buddha, and he asks, and there's a multitude of people, and he asks the Buddha. The Buddha replies, when one with one's mind filled with recollection of the Buddha passes away with his or mind directed to Buddha Nisati and her heart in devotion to Buddha, if one has not reached spiritual attainment in this life, a happy world is waiting for him after death, or he will be reborn in a happier realm. And to demonstrate this, he summons the boy down from the heaven realms. The boy stands there and confirms that this is in fact what has happened. And the story ends with both the boy and his father become stream enterers. That is, they've entered the first of the 4 phases of enlightenment, first 4 stages, and 80,000 people awaken to the truth that day. The end. So that was the teaching story about the importance of devotion. Now, I'm sure, somebody could be thinking, what can I do with a story like that? That is bullshit. Well, okay, I'll concede that point. On a literal level, we're not going to, modern Americans are not going to accept this as the truth. Although, I do find it kind of touching that for thousands of years, people have had a warm faith in this kind of story. It was meant to be, it was told as the truth, but it was also meant to make a couple of points. And the first one is to impress on people the importance of an attitude of reverence, trust, and devotion on the path. That's the first thing. The second, I guess the obvious lesson there is the lesson about karma. That what you are devoted to, what is your highest concern in this life, will have karmic effects on your life and probably, possibly, on the next life. And of course, if you can't accept the doctrine of rebirth, then, well, we have it on the authority of the Buddha that you're not supposed to accept anything on the authority of the Buddha. But the point is that a life of devotion and reverence, however you evoke that, is essential to the spiritual path. So anyway, so that's my whole act. Okay, I got other stuff, but I'll stop there. And I would like to have a discussion. We've got, how much you have now?
Oh, you've got plenty of time. We have like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll read one more thing. This is from William James on prayer and devotion. Because I was thinking about this when I was putting this talk together. So I read this book. I mean, it must be 40 years ago now. You know the Varieties of Religious Experience, that book? It's a really interesting book by the 19th century psychologist and philosopher William James, in which he goes through religious experiences, mystical experiences, devotions, illuminations, awakenings, conversions. He felt there was a class of religious experience that he tried to study. And in the last chapter, he comes to his conclusions about what religious experience, in general, in any religion, means. What he concluded is that all this experience there has to be, where there's smoke, there has to be fire. Where so much activity is going on, there must be a cause to it. And so I'll read one of the paragraphs of his conclusions about these experiences. He concluded, the conscious person is continuous with a wider self through which saving experiences come. The further limits of our being plunge, it seems to me, into an altogether other dimension of existence from the sensible and merely understandable world. Name it the mystical region or the supernatural region, whichever you choose. So far as our ideal impulses originate in this region, and most of them do originate in it, for we find them possessing us in a way for which we cannot articulately account. We belong to it in a more intimate sense than that in which we belong to the visible world. For we belong in the most intimate sense wherever our ideals belong. Yet the unseen region in question is not merely ideal, for it produces effects in this world. When we commune with it, work is actually done upon our finite personality, for we are turned into new men, and consequences in the way of conduct follow in the natural world upon our regenerative change. But that which produces effects within another reality must be termed a reality itself. So I feel as if we had no philosophic excuse for calling the unseen or mystical world unreal. Thank you. So in the discussion, I would, instead of questions, I don't have any answers to any questions. I would just be interested in how this affects people, but also what your experience of prayer, devotional prayer, that kind of stuff, how that works in your life, if it or doesn't. If anyone would mind talking about it and sharing. Okay.
Well, I have a question. So your book talks about a devotional life, and you're talking back in the Buddhist time, mostly. How do you see a devotional life manifest today?
That's a good question. I would love to hear other people answer that, frankly, because I think it's really hard. You know, when I read this story about the kid becoming a god, you know, I mean, part of me thinks, wow, you know, that people could actually believe that. And on the other hand, there's a part of me, a pang of, wow, you know, that that kind of open-heartedness existed in the world, and it still does in Tibet and Sri Lanka and places. And when I was in India again, the capacity for that, there isn't much of it in the U.S. And I'm not.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that that's a gain. That we've disenchanted the world, that we can't do that.
I was actually very touched by that example of the monks. What country was that in again?
There was India. There was Bodhgaya.
I love that kind of open, joyous acceptance. And I know your politics and my politics are very similar. All I've been feeling now has been just kind of anger and despair and trying to live on my life.
Yes.
Totally pissed off with this country and its values. And it's hardly a devotional life that I'm living right now in that aspect.
I know.
And, I would like to be like one of those happy Indian monks. And that's so far as I'm removed from how I see my situation right now. It makes me feel sad.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, well, we've talked. I almost want to cry when I think about it now. What's happened, to my country, and part of that, I want to be in the resistance. I do need to be engaged, and I am to the degree I can be. But my practice is important to me now because this is where I want to get the juice going. Where I want to awaken love and devotion and hope and belief in spiritual ideals. And remember the long arc of history, which is an act of faith, the belief that we're going to emerge from all this.
Well, that long arc might not start bending down until long after I'm dead.
Yeah.
I would like to see a little bending down while I'm still on this planet.
I would too. I want to see Trump gone before I die. I mean,
not only Trump, but everything that represents everything that got Trump elected.
Yes.
The whole thoughts and what is that? And emotions and attitudes and beliefs that got that man all that power.
Sure.
Sort of piggyback on that. I think what we're experiencing is over the last, say, 30 years or so, conservatives have co-opted, conservative political people have co-opted religion and tried to make those one and the same. And so it's the baby being thrown out with the bathwater. All devotion belongs to, these conservative Baptists in the South, and we don't want to align with them in any form.
Yes.
And the same thing has happened on the political side where, a progressive or liberal wouldn't think of maybe flying the American flag because then they'd be associated perhaps in the eyes of others with these ultra-conservatives, And yet what is it we're fighting for? We want our country to be better, which is represented by the flag. So I'm just saying it's very interesting but also sad that this chasm has opened up, where on one side is devotion and religion and everything of its ilk, and, if you're a patriot, we don't want to have anything to do with you.
I know.
So what is it? We can have devotion, we can have love for country or an ideal of what our country should be, and not have to back away from everything that are these essentially labels. Yeah.
I know it is terrible that what you said. You've described it very well. That devotion has been co-opted, and it is now right-wing xenophobia and jingoism. That's religion now, and
it's all become slogans.
And slogans, and there's no heart in it. Well, maybe there is for some of these people. I don't know. I don't get them. I never. When they work themselves up into frenzies, I see this on television and fundamentalist. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand it. It's not what I feel when I go to Spirit Rock. When I can get into my own versions of devotional frenzy and joy and oneness with the universe and so on too. I can do that. But the forms are harder to find. I'm really glad to have a place like Spirit Rock or the various meditation groups around town. They're very important to me. They awaken something.
I was just going to say this might be kind of silly, but I went out and bought a baseball cap that I sometimes wear. I haven't worn it here, but it's red, white, and it has the American flag on it. woven into the first part of it here. And I kind of wore it, I bought it for myself because I felt that, just like Tom was just saying, it's not the right to be either, to think about Jesus or to think about love of country and to wear something that's symbolic of the United States. So I kind of wore it as a screw you to them, but then I get the liberals who give me these really weird looks when I walk down the street because they think that I'm probably from, like I voted for Trump. So I'm kind of doing like a screw you to everybody. I don't care, but it's sad to me. And then the other thing that kills me is Jesus. It's like you hear Jesus, and instead of being who he really was and what I believe he was about and his message, it gets lost because you start thinking about the Southern Baptists and we all love Jesus, and then Jesus, of course, can't stand any of us because we're all gay because of that whole idea of the way they've taken his name and bastardized it, So it's really hard.
Yeah,
It's
there's a
very
whole
difficult.
movement right now, or not a movement, but there are people who are saying like progressive rallies and protests and stuff should be flying the American flag.
Right.
Like take it back.
Exactly. Take it back.
Just like gays took back the pink triangle and made it like a symbol of
Right. The word queer.
or the what's that?
And the word queer, did you
The
get
word
that?
queer.
Exactly.
All these things. It's like they
I
have
went
to
to
take it back.
I went to
Lose it.
8th Street because they have these really cool, couple of really cool stores that will design like you can design your own T-shirt. So I wanted a T-shirt with a really cool American flag on it that said "Grateful to be American," not proud but grateful, because I was thinking of just my roots here at GBF, and I thought that would be cool. I was going to get a purple one. Why? Because it's red and blue. I was going to get a purple T-shirt with a flag. The binders were this big. There were 3 of them. Not one binder had an American flag in it. Not one. And what does that tell you? I mean, it's sad to me.
Sir?
I wanted to get back to prayer.
Oh, good. I was hoping so.
So if it's a delusion that there's somebody out there who will answer your prayer, it's also a delusion that we can be self-reliant, or even it's a delusion that we have a self. So there's something about getting to the point where you drop to your knees because you need help. That's an acknowledgement that you don't control everything. I think that creates conditions in you to be open to other things.
That is so well said. I love that. That's where I get to the point where I just say, help, and I mean it. And there are many times when it feels like help flows in. And I don't understand it. I don't have and I used to worry about it. I'm going to come out here. The term God is meaningful to me. I have to say I don't know what I'm talking about when I use it, but I do use it based on mystical experiences that I had when I was 20, the sense of connecting with everything. And that was the word that was available, and I've always used it. I use it judiciously because, and when I started doing Buddhist practice, it was 22 years ago. We got to update that.
I was going to ask you, but I forgot.
But I got worried. How can I call myself a Buddhist? And it really worried me. Can I be in this club? So I was on a retreat with Jack Cornfield one time, a men's retreat, and you have these little 10-minute meetings with the teacher. So I'm going to ask him. I said. So I sat. I was a little scared. It was a big deal for me. So I sat. And I said, Jack, I'm really not sure I can call myself a Buddhist. He said, why? I said, because I believe in God. And so when I said that, he went, and he had this moment with the word, he just like floated out of his body. And I thought, well, that's a good answer, because that experience is what I mean when I use that word. And then he came back down into his body, and he said, I wouldn't worry very much about being a Buddhist, which is cool, from one of the foremost Buddhist teachers in the country. He said, become a Buddha. Awaken. And then I finally got this non-attachment to views idea. He wasn't going to argue the catechism with me. He wasn't going to say, well, we, the Buddhists, there's no creator God. which would have been a terrible thing to say to me at that point, and irrelevant, right? Become a Buddha, awaken. And your views, your beliefs, your theism, your non-theism, your polytheism, your pantheism, whatever, that's not the point of the practice. And I finally got what non-attachment to views, at least I got my understanding of what non-attachment to views means. So I've never worried about that again. I've never worried about beliefs or unbeliefs as essential to this practice at all. Hey,
let me follow
good to see you, Lee.
This interesting dialogue, interesting and troubling. So I'm with Jack Kornfeld. I think that's an appropriate answer, but it concerns me that devotion is quite a dangerous idea. Not that it doesn't work sometimes for some people and create benefits, but that's what Jesus Christ asked for. That's what Muhammad asked for. Mm-hmm. Or if you want to find more striking examples, go to the little sects of various sorts of Christian other churches. Or if you really want to see it existing, go to a Trump rally.
Yes.
I'm very serious about that.
Oh, I know.
And as you were reading this, I've been trying to do an exegesis of Trump's book back before he was a politician. And as you were reading the aspects of it, I was thinking, yeah, all of that. I don't know. Of course, I don't know what he believes internally, but all of that is very consistent with what he's saying. Believe in me, and
the leader,
we will find the millennium.
Yeah.
So I think, and the other thought that comes to mind is Stephen Levine's statement about Buddhist teachers in Burma, I believe, Myanmar now. And he said, well, there's a problem, that a lot of them are drunks. And he said, what you need to do is you listen to them in the half of the time when they're sober, and the half of the time when they're drunk, you don't. So I'm not sure what the alternative answer is, because so I've been following Buddhism for 25 years. I'm a card-carrying Democrat all my life and so forth. But I don't think that comes to thoughtless devotion. So if they say it, that must be it. And I don't, the problem is finding what do we do instead? Finding that.
Yeah, and that question's concerned me a lot over devotion to the leader. I mean, that's what Nazism was, and the various cults and so on. Yeah, that is true. And blind faith, and yes, that's dangerous. And where I don't want to just stop there too, because that's pretty much where I was for many years. What the kind of devotion that has fed me is a kind of an open-heartedness. It's where the boundaries come down, whereas the kind of devotion you're talking about, the boundaries are up. Myself, and there's always another. These believers, they don't all believe in God, but they all believe in the devil. Right? And you've got to have a devil. And maybe that's what it is. It's not having a devil. That's a good one. I like that idea. So there is something in that I find useful. I'll tell you another. I'm coming out here. I might as well just talk about why this is so important to me. One of the my devotional practices is toward Ramana Maharshi. You know who he is? Yeah. Great Hindu saint. Great realized being. I mean, it's an amazing story. It's almost miraculous to read his story. He was 16 years old and he had this awakening, and he just never came down again, and became one of the great teachers in India. And never had much of a life, just went to this holy mountain, Arunachala, and became a teacher. Well, I feel connected to him, and I don't know what that means exactly, but my teacher was a student of his. Ramana had a student, Papaji, who taught my teacher, who teaches me. And so there's this sense of lineage. I don't know what the hell that means. But when I look at the picture of this man, my heart opens. And I feel my subjective experiences, energy flows in. I don't have to explain that. But I keep a picture of him, Ramana. So this is how one of the ways I found devotion. In my office, when I'm seeing patients, I have his picture, and it's this sweet, I should have brought the picture, I was going to. This sweet old man, just smiling. And when I'm forgetting compassion, when I'm getting triggered by something, or just feeling dry in the session, I'll look at him. And the patients there, people don't know, I'm looking, and something happens. Not always, but there's a sense of a connection, of a devotional energy, and it helps me, And people have been doing this for years, looking at gurus and the Buddha and Kuan Yin and all that. I mean, this is Christians do it. I mean, I think some Christians who do this with Jesus or Mary. Oh, and the other place, I've seen this in India, I forgot. When I've been in Catholic churches in Mexico, I see it there too. Not Catholic churches in the U.S. that I've ever been, and none that I've ever been in. But in Mexico, a sense of community and devotion. Yeah, and the other thing isn't the path of self-reliance, right? It's a corporate, that the spiritual path has always been seen as all of us, not you sitting in your apartment alone doing something, right? It's never been that way. So did that help at all? No devil. I like that idea. In true devotion, there's no devil. I don't know whether that's true, but I like the idea. There's nothing to be against.
And so I think that's part of the problem with where we are now, and what I see happening, not just in the U.S., but over the developed world, is a great resurgence of tribalism. And one can go on to look for the things behind that. But tribalism, and we're a little tribe here, a gay Buddhist tribe, tribalism does not seem like a bad thing in itself, probably a good thing. The problem with it is then the other tribes become them. Yeah. The enemy, we don't understand them, they're crazy, they're evil, and what we need to do is get rid of them.
Exactly. Well, reminds me of something Bertrand Russell said about patriotism. He said, love of one's country is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's hatred of the other countries that's bad, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike.
We have time for one more question.
Mike.
I just want to say, the etymology of devotion, it comes from the Latin. It means to vow, de volere. And in a way, devotion is a kind of vow, following of a path, which can be, all different kinds of paths, I think. And, your depiction, your description of the monks in India, I've seen the same thing in Catholic monastic communities. I think it depends. One of the community, you see it in other ecstatic communities too.
Yes.
And we choose to follow a path, trying to understand Buddhism.
Thanks. Oh, and I printed out this article from Tricycle, Buddhism's Higher Power. So it was it interested me because it was a woman who is talking about her prayer devotion practice. I found it an interesting article. If anyone wants to read it, I'll just leave it out. It was interesting. So
I can post it to our Facebook page too.
Oh, could you? I'll give it to you then.
Yeah. I'll just find it on Tricycle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for dealing with it. It's a kind of controversial subject, but I thought I'm glad that.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Next week we will not have a speaker, we will have open discussion. So for any of you who have never been to an open discussion, it would be great to come. It's a really cool way to meet other people from the Sangha and get different ideas. So that'll be next week. And Dhamma is the Pali word for giving. And we ask that you contribute today if you can, $10, but whatever you can contribute is greatly appreciated. It does cover the rent, newsletter, the speakers, the Larkin Street dinners, and the mailers that we do. Our host today.
Yes, I'm the host today. Welcome everyone. There's a food out there on the table. Please help yourself. There's tea, hot water and tea. We just ask that you rinse out, or actually just put the teacup in the dishwasher and go with it. Great. There's a sign-up sheet at the credenza. You need to be careful with yourself on the list. And I'll be walking up the Donegal, and many of us meet at around 12:30 to head out for lunch.
Thank you.
Our day-long retreat is happening in 2 Saturdays on March 25th. Saturday, March 25th, right here. Heather Sundberg is the teacher. There are registration flyers out there, green flyers. There's a URL provided that will take you to the registration, online registration. There's no registration fee. We will ask for a contribution to the teacher, and we are providing lunch. As of last week, I think 30 people are registered. We have room for up to 50, so if you're interested, please register soon. And if you have any questions, please see me. Thanks.
Any other announcements? Okay, let's please stand for dedication now. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.